My name is Herb Rice, the name I'm known by. But, my traditional name is Cowichan. I was born on one of the Gulf Islands out here, an island called Norway Island. It's a very small island. Actually, I was really inspired by that island as I got older, because I dug for my roots. My roots led me right back there. I remember very clearly running around on the island. We fished off the end. We had an orchard on it. It's 40 acres overall. We had no electricity. We had no water. Everything was, if it wasn't there, it had to be brought in. So getting on Norway Island was just that. It was a leasehold. Then it became a purchase, I believe. And we were the last family on the island. I was the last Rice born on that island. For a little kid, this is before I was 5 years old. It was great, because you'd run free. Most of the time we were just in cutoffs and bare feet, running up and down the island, hiding out, playing on the beaches, fishing in the orchards, crabbing, stuff like that, waiting for father to come home. Generally he'd be fishing, either out in the Narrows, or he'd be digging clams, oysters, crabbing on the beaches. He'd find his favorite cod jigging spot. We never had a shortage of food. Didn't matter how poor we were. We didn't have to pay any bills except for getting food. Cowichan takes in quite a wide area. He was actually part of Penelakut, which is one of the Gulf Islands. His father's mother was from out there. In fact, my great-grandma is one of the people depicted on the Native Heritage mural in Chemainus. She was known as Mary Rice, or Smalee. She was one of the people who all people met in Chemainus. All people interacted with her because she was a medicine woman. She was a midwife. So she brought a lot of people into the world, both native and non-native. And she knew that she had to learn the new language, the language we speak now. So she actually traded her work for learning how to speak English. So I look at Salish art, I look at Quegilth art, I look at New Chatnulth art, and I find that I'm comfortable with all of it. I don't have any difficulty being a part of it, because I'm part of those people. And I'm designing. Designing is I go into a space where I literally have to become the story. I become whatever it is that I want to portray. For me, I look at you and I ask you questions, and I come up with a response, and my response is like it comes through my hand and my pencil on my paper. I'll do up a quick sketch, then the sketch takes form in different ways as I progress through it. I clean it up and make it stronger and stand out more as a sketch. I have spent probably 30 odd years looking at who and what I am and where I'm from. Every story that I've heard does resonate through me as I do a piece of artwork or tell a story or reach out into the community and do something in terms of sharing. Even the tree the trees are one simple log that people look at and say, well, that's a red cedar log. Say it is, but how old is it? What has that tree seen? Where has it come from? How long has it stood and waved its branches at you? Waved its branches at your father, your mother, your grandparents. How long has that tree been around? Watching and seeing who and what you are. And how many people have passed underneath it and touched it and shared its energy of life. In my early 20s, I started to look at it, and one of the people I interacted with was actually a student of Simon Charlie, who was a master carver from here. He showed me some basic techniques in carving and gave me some tools. I started carving then, and I started drawing then, and it didn't stay with me long. And later on in life, in my early 30s, I started looking at it again. In fact, I dropped everything. I worked in the city, had an office and suits, and I left all of that behind, and I came home because I had an experience with one of my cousins in a shop in Nanaimo, where there were a group of people working in a studio space. There's wood chips and dust everywhere. I was able to assist in working on projects and just putting my hand on pieces. And there's such a warmth that comes back from wood for me. Now, different people have different senses, but if you put your hand on there and just gently move it, you can feel an energy. For me, I feel that energy very strongly, and it resonates within me. I look at something and it tells me what I need to know, what I need to remove. And it's gotten stronger since I was in that studio, since I actually committed to myself that year. I bought a knife blade and decided at that time that that's what I was going to do. I left everything else behind and became a carver. I've had people who have influenced me in technique and commitment, and in terms of art, I look at the greater world and I see masters like Bill Reed and Simon Charlie and the Hunt family and Norval Morisot, Michelangelo. I look at their artwork and their designs and their concepts, and I see how they portray it. And I know I do the same thing when I portray my art. Where it comes from a root, and I have to work with it from a root. I can't rush anything. I can't push it any harder than it wants to go. I just allow it to be. So influences are both local and not so local, because I'm part of that greater world again. There's so many things out there that are interesting and that have influenced our people and our culture, our traditional ways, our tools that we use. Certainly the tools are part of what I use to assist me in taking away the bulk wood, but the final design is all by hand. So it comes from here, through here, and out through here. You know, when I first started, I basically made my handles based on what's comfortable for me. That's for me, it was looking at sort of not only what's comfortable, but what's correct for me. I make it in a certain way so that I can meet my physical impairments. Because I have very weak thumbs. So I have to make sure that everything fits my hand exactly, because if it doesn't, then my thumb gets sore, my wrist gets sore. I've got a wrapper on it now because it needs it. But the handle was the most important thing. I see a lot of carvers, artists who use tools will use just a basic tool from anywhere, anything. It doesn't matter. And a lot of them have been bound in a green cord, and I recognize that that was a way that was done before because people didn't have glue. So they used the cord that they had, and most of them were fishermen. So they would get a cord from their fishing boat and bind a blade to a handle, and that worked. Now we don't need that, so now I just use an epoxy. So that, for example, that particular blade, the blade points inwards rather than outwards, and you do what your parents told you never to do. You pull towards yourself. So this one you hold closer to the blade, so the whole meat of it is right in the palm of your hand. That one's a little bit big for you. Mm-hmm. I have a method for picking out the exact size, but I can't tell you that because it's a secret.
It's a secret. If you tell me, you'd have to kill me.
A handle like that you can hold for a whole day without any issue. When I give carving courses, that's one of the things that I do. I make sure that every tool suits the person who's going to use it. Because say when they come here, one of the first things that we work on is a knife. We come to an understanding about the handle. And I share with the individual what's important about the handle and why it's shaped the way it is, so that they can utilize it in the techniques that I show in the courses that I do. But every individual artist has their own technique, their way of teaching. Mine is from me. Mine is what I find the most efficient for doing line cuts, doing relief, doing layering, doing three-dimensional, doing flat carving. There's so many different styles of carving. Many carvers will use 100 different knives, but I've found that over 25 years of experience that I have 3 particular knives that I use in carving. The one that you had first there was the double-edged, it's sharp on both edges, and it comes up to a slight curve, so it's held, pulling towards you. But even with that, there's a technique to it. But that's one of my most important work tools. Is a double-edged, slightly bent, and of course the handle has one wide part and one narrow part, but it's made to suit my hand. Mm-hmm. So I can pull with that or put my thumb up for leverage and use it. And the other 2 knives that I use they're made the same. There's a straight one and one that's sharp on the radius, and each one has its own technique for using, for layering in the eye cuts or the tooth cuts, or getting right into the corners, or rounding off, or texturing, or making a line cut somewhere that I can bump up to. Like I make a line cut here, and I go up to it. And one of the 3 tools assists me in doing that. The techniques that I teach do show that. They show every aspect of carving a from a small flat piece to a three-dimensional piece, depending on which program you take. I do have a totem pole in the city of Duncan, actually, that I did in 1988 with one of my teachers. In fact, we did that together. That one has an eagle and a sea lion on it, and it's done in a fairly classic, basic style. That's probably the most, that one sticks in my mind the most, because that was the first totem that I did with somebody else. The second one that I did, I actually secured a commission to do an 18-foot totem pole that had 3 figures on it. I designed it, and then I called my teacher in to assist me with it. So from that point on, I just started doing my own thing. In fact, when I got that totem pole, I spoke with Master Carver, late Simon Charlie, and they said, well, Herb, he said, now that you've started carving totem poles, he said, it'll never end. He said, that's what you will do. That's one of the things you'll do. But, and he told me some things about it, about carving cedar, working with cedar, understanding cedar. He never ever said, do this design or make this design work for you like this. He just said, you'll do it, and that's it. So when I design a totem pole, I design it based on what I know about art and design on 3-dimension. Because a totem pole, you have to look at it in a very different way. I mean, they're bigger than you are. And to actually move something around like that is a very awkward thing. You have to be able to work on one side and do the same thing on the other side. And you have to picture it so that it's clear with you what you can do. There are techniques for that. You can come to an understanding of it. Even if you're not an artist, you can learn technique. And with that technique, you can take a design and transfer it to a totem pole or a panel or a door or a talking stick. So, yeah, when I do that, I don't know, I take just a flat design that I draw, and I can picture it completely from there. But if I
3-dimension.
yeah, but if I need to make a professional drawing, then I have to take that drawing that I've made in one profile. Generally, that's where I'll start, as a profile, and I have to make a frontal. And if it's going to be carved all the way around, then I have to make a back design as well. So I will take that design and draw it to scale, and all the way around. That's like an architect. An architect will draw everything to scale. I do the same thing, so that when I look at it, I can see it clearly. When another person looks at it with some explanation, they can see it clearly. If I think that, or they request it, I'll put color into it as well. I can scan it in, use a Photoshop program, and put as near to the color that it's going to be in there as possible, so they get a better view of it. Sometimes it is difficult to see, unless it's right in front of you. I barely have to touch pencil to paper. Like I said a little bit earlier, if I ask you a question, and usually with that question, I get a picture of the design that you're looking at. For example, I might say, well, what animal stands out with you really strongly? or what is important to you in terms of philosophy. You asked about metals earlier on, and I do use sort of a hammered copper in some of my works, but primarily my work is in wood, in red cedar or yellow cedar or local pine or alder. I try and work with those. Primarily it's red cedar and yellow cedar. I like bigger pieces of totem poles. I like to create them in red cedar. The red cedar is I guess an easier wood to work with because it withstands the weather a lot better. And to finish it properly, you'd have to know how to work it, definitely. Like, it has a particular grain to it that you need to follow and understand. All woods do. A red cedar is really finicky. So if you get a wrong cut, you can break a piece off that's 6 feet long. Yellow cedar, it's a little more resinous. It's an oilier texture, so it's a lot harder, a lot firmer, and when I work with it, I like to use yellow cedar to create more intricate designs. Pine, local Vancouver Island white pine, I like to use for smaller pieces, less design, but they have that nice, rich, sort of honeyed finish to it. Alder, I'll sometimes use in bowls and masks. You have to work fast with it because it's a finickier wood than most. It will check and crack really quickly. I've sent pieces to Europe, to England. Now that piece will be going to Spain, to New Zealand, Australia, the US, to many different places around the world. But I do have clients coming back because they feel a connection, or they feel that, okay, somebody has heard them and depicted something that was to them. They come to me initially because they've seen my artwork and they really appreciate the way that I depict my art in our traditional style. And because they like that, they want something designed by me. I have had training from a Quegulth artist and training from Salish artists. And I've seen many artists in action. I spent some time going to Bill Reed's studio on Granville Island when he was there. To the west coast, I went to Port Alberni. I spent time with a master silversmith up there. I just visited him in his home, but I'd look over his shoulder and watch what he was doing. My own teachers here, I did all of their basic work for them. And I tried to complete some of the pieces in their style, and I could never do that. I never felt comfortable copying exactly their work. I would do their style, but only in my own way. When you ask me, what would you call your work? How would you explain it? I would sort of call it a Northwest Coast contemporary style. And if people wanted a little bit of a mixture in there, then I would say, well, very clearly it has some Quegulth and some Salish segments to it. But I wouldn't call myself a traditional Coast Salish carver. If I did that, I'd have a totally different type of work. I'm not. I do my artwork in the Northwest Coast style, and it has that flavoring. Because every day that I look at what I do. I'm humbled by the fact that I know that the artwork, a simple totem pole, a simple art piece, is going to be around a lot longer than me. I'm humbled even more by the fact that somebody appreciates it enough to actually either order it or purchase it to take into their homes. That I can create something that is appreciated that much. It's a humbling experience. It makes you want to both carry on doing what you do and also to understand why you're doing it.